Hello and welcome to another edition of Turned Out a Punk. I'm your host, Damian Abraham, and once again I'm bringing you a conversation with someone who grew up listening to punk, may or may not still be involved with punk, but had life changed by the genre in a major way. And today on the show, there's no other way to put it, the legend, Jeff Gunnells from Cold as Life from H8Inc. Jeff G is here on the show. Ramallah, more on that in 1 second. This is a huge guest for me, though. But first, if you want to get in touch with me, head over to the email address, turnedoutapunkpodcast@gmail.com. That is run by my brother and show producer and normally guest booker extraordinaire, but we got to thank Dom for this one. More on that in a second, too. And he will get the message to me. He also does the Turned Out a Punk Instagram page at Turned Out a Punk. If you're looking for me on social media, I'm at Left4Damian on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to support the show, the best way to support the show is just by telling all your friends about it, letting them know that we do things like this. Detroit Week. This is actually the culmination of the Detroit weekend turned week. But, so let them know that we do this kind of stuff. We have all sorts of different types of guests on here. You can also subscribe to it and rate it on the platform that you're listening to it on. And you can head over to patreon.com/turnedoutapunk. And thank you to all the folks that do that. And support the show that way. And speaking of support, this show would not be possible with the kind, loving support of the fine folks at Vans, who said, Damian, do your podcast, just don't do it out of your own pocket. And they help me cover the cost of doing this thing, and it is very much appreciated. Thank you very much to them for supporting this thing. Also, check out over there at floodmagazine.com the Punk as Fuck videos that I did a couple years ago. Some really wild stuff, to quote a very dated Johnny Carson. He's no longer with us, so that's how dated these references are. And anyway, but there's videos with me going to breakfast with Steve Albini and Don Bowles, going through Brian Ray Turcotte's punk rock museum in his office. There's a lot of fun stuff on that thing, so check those out. And finally, check out Fucked Up's brand new Year of the Horse. It is on Bandcamp now. More information on what's going to happen with it in the coming weeks. But Chapter 3 has just dropped, featuring Matt from The National, someone I'm a huge fan of. And yeah, I'm stoked for you to hear it. So check out all that stuff. All right. Well, actually, speaking of things you got to check out, we can't go on any further without saying pick up this reissue of Born to Land Hard by Cold as Life, which has just come out on the newly resurrected A389 Recordings, which is run by my buddy, Mr. Day of Mourning himself, Dom, who I've known for years. And he will be a upcoming guest on this show very, very soon. But he got in touch with me and said, would you like Jeff G from Cold as Life to come on Turned Out a Punk? And I said, absolutely. This is a dream come true. Growing up in Toronto, this was the band, we're geographically pretty close to Detroit. This was the band that loomed large for us, a band of legend. Like, this is the definition of hardcore. Like, this is a band that Madball wrote a song about how hard this band is. Like, this is no joke. And I think when you listen to this episode, you realize that, these legends, we tend to glorify them and we tend to play them up in punk rock. But when you hear this, there's a real human toll behind all these legends, and it's one person's legend and story that gets repeated and exaggerated at times, and sometimes just told verbatim. It tends to glamorize it and glorify it, but the reality is there's a real human cost behind all this stuff. So I think you really get that when listening to this and listening to Jeff talk about these things. Like, there's no other way to put it. This is a very harrowing episode. There's a lot of death and a lot of sadness in amongst, all this incredible music and all these stories that we, repeat over and over again. Anyway, you'll hear all this stuff kind of come up throughout the show. I'm not going to ramble on anymore. Once again, though, do pick up Born to Land Hard. Like, it is probably like one of the hardest hardcore records of all time. I will put this up against a lot of different things. The lyrics, just everything about this thing is just on another level, and it's incredible that it's finally going to be out on vinyl. Like, this has never been out on vinyl, which always bothered me as a kid, and now it's finally been rectified. So thank you, Dom. All right, I'm not going to ramble on anymore. Sit back, relax, and enjoy Jeff G on Turned Out a Punk. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure, Damian. I appreciate you.
Well, as I was just telling you kind of off air before we went here, growing up in Toronto, Colton's life loomed large here for us being, kind of geographically close to Detroit. So to finally get to talk to you and kind of, put voice to the legend, it's a huge thrill for me.
Well, I'm grateful to be here, Damian. I appreciate it. And I apologize for all the postponing, but sometimes duty calls and responsibilities, life demands much, but I'm glad we finally got a chance to talk.
Well, I've been waiting 20 years to talk to you, so a few extra days was nothing to add on to that. I got to start this off, though, the way they all start off, which is, Jeff, how did you get into punk? Do you remember the first time you ever came across it?
Oh, geez. It was probably a Discharge record or a GBH record I ran across. And so when I was coming up, vinyl was huge, and record stores were still around, and Roy and I used to go into record stores, and we would just look. We would spend the day at the record store, and I remember coming across Leather Bristle Studs and Acne by GBH. It might have been earlier release, but I think GBH was probably the first punk record I ever got.
And what kind of stuff were you into before that? Like just when you started going to the record stores with Roy?
Oh gosh. Oh man. I was always a metal kid, man. Metallica when off to Kill 'Em All, and Creeping Death, and Slayer's Show No Mercy, and Haunting the Chapel. And I eventually got to a point where it was the metal stuff was all kind of fantasy, kind of mystical or whatever, and I wanted, I guess, a little more real life. Some of the things that I was feeling, and wanted to communicate myself. It's just started appealing to me, and the punk rock, it just kind of morphed into it.
And had you gone to any concerts kind of prior to finding the GBH record?
Oh geez, the first real hardcore punk show I believe that I went to was a Dayglow Abortion, Gore, Ugly But Proud, Necros at the
what a bill. Oh my God.
At this place called the Greystone, a legendary place in Detroit. I was playing in a metal band, and I want to say, I don't know, maybe my junior year in high school. And I went down there with a couple guys that I was playing with, and they were scared. They didn't want to go in, but I got out of the car and told them to pick me up in 3 hours. And I ended up going into this show by myself, and I was sold.
Was it like a big scene at that point? Like how many people would have been at a show like that?
It's always been kind of a smaller scene. I wouldn't say it was a giant show, but I could probably, guesstimate maybe 400 or 500 people there.
Wow. So what year would this been?
I want to say 87, 88, somewhere in there. Damian, so I've been asked questions like this before, right? Like to give dates and specifics. A lot of those years were kind of a blur. So, I'll be as accurate as I can, but some of those times and some of those days were, they're kind of a blur, bud.
Well, I know. I just more to place it kind of in eras of Detroit, because I'm fascinated by the way, because obviously punk's born there, but just how it develops there. And I find there's very specific, like, looking from a distance, of course, but it feels like there's very, specific kind of, I don't know, like eras or vibes in the punk that's coming out of that city at different times. And like sort of towards the late 80s, like I guess Depression Records would have been kind of a bigger scene. Like Ugly and Proud and Boom and the Legion of Doom and those types of bands?
Oh, they were a huge part of it. Negative Approach were doing their thing. Necros was a big part of Detroit. The Ugly But Proud, the Gore, Heresy was another great hardcore punk band in the day. SBLC. Gosh, there's so many, man. There's so many. I couldn't possibly name them all, but it was always a supported scene, but Detroit was kind of segregated, man. There was
Yeah.
cliques and crews and little subgenres, man. And a lot of people were flying flags. And if you weren't under that flag, then there was fights. And it was an odd time, man. But it was always supported, you know, and the people that really liked the music would go no matter the outcome of the night. You know, sometimes you had to fight to stick around. Sometimes you had to fight to get in. Sometimes you had to fight to get out. But there was a lot of really good bands from Detroit, and it was punk, it was hardcore, it was metal, and whether you liked any of those genres, you would go and you would appreciate and you would support and you would make flyers, and it was a good time, man. But it was also a bit of a challenge just to be part of something like that, because it was just so it was dangerous back then. It was back when punk was dangerous, you know what I mean? And the city we lived in was a bit dangerous too. If you didn't know how to navigate or carry yourself, you could find yourself in trouble quick.
Well, that's why, that's why I'm fascinated by it, because like you're saying, there's everything that's represented there. Like it's, way smaller than New York, but you have every type of manifestation of punk rock showing up there, from garage rock to like more like splatterpunk stuff to oi to hardcore. Like it feels like it's just it's brimming with punk bands.
It was, so I was a music fan, right?
Mm.
And I am a music fan. More important than genre or era, it was the music and the content of their message and what they stood for, what they were willing to fight for, that mattered to me more. So I could go to a metal show, I could go to a punk show, I could go to a hardcore show, but it had to mean something. It had to be good. It had to be real and genuine and sincere, and stand for a little something. But being so many genres and subgenres and little cliques, it was all punk rock, or it was all aggressive, or it was all just real. And that's what appealed to me mostly about the punk and the hardcore, as opposed to the metal. Because the metal, like I said, it was all mystical and fantasy, and I ended up kind of outgrowing that and finding a voice, or kind of focusing on what I wanted to hear or think or feel, and there was just things I identified with that everyday life, that angst and uncertainty of life itself. And it, the hardcore, the punk scene just seemed to be a little more of what I identified with.
That band Boom and the Legion of Doom is a band that, so many people have come on the show and talked about, and there's so many stories about them, from them like throwing a dead deer carcass at Youth of Today to just being, just like a really intense band. But they're also a band that put out tons of records, incredible like art on their records as well. Did you ever see that band live?
I have. Yeah, I have.
What were they like for you? Like, what are some memories around that band?
I mean, it's a bit of a blur, man, but gosh, Damian, I'm not gonna lie to you, it was a blur. But I know that I've seen them quite a few times. But I know that their name carried weight. I know that they drew, heads to see them. But I couldn't tell you specifics about what I remember of them.
So when did Colton's life begin to come together?
Well, so we had a punk band. It was Roy, myself, and Jay Way. We were called the Mattress Rats, and that was shortly after we started pulling away from like the metal, like the Slayers, the Creators, the Voivods, and really started getting into punk. And we were writing, we probably had an album's worth of material, and we didn't have a singer or a bass player. And we were looking, and we had known of Ron from the scene, So he wanted to come check it out and see if he could put some lyrics down to some of the stuff we had. And he ended up bringing Jimmy Doom, who was Robbie Doom, who was Jimmy Doom's little brother, the singer for ALD's little brother.
Okay,
and
yeah.
He played bass, and so they showed up, and we went through our set, and Ron already had lyrics, and we ended up leaving that little session with probably 4, 5, 6 songs. Ron really liked it, and Jimmy Doom was more of an oi cat because of his older brother playing in ALD. It was a little too maybe aggressive for him, and he didn't want anything to do with it. And Ron was sold; he wanted in, so we started playing.
Would any of those songs you guys came up with in that jam wind up on the Breaking the Law demo?
Oh, geez. I imagine so, but I couldn't tell you specifics. But yeah, I imagine so.
Was it already kind of that vibe? Like, did you guys figured out the sound from that first practice? Kind of like that, oi meets hardcore, kind of, I guess, is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, that was definitely the sound. Yeah, that was the direction we were going in for sure, and that's what we stuck with for quite a few years. It wasn't even like we were trying to let's do oi with a hardcore sound, or let's do this with that sound. It was just something. Discharge was a huge influence on us, and so was a lot of the English punk bands like Cockspur and Cockney Rejects, and like I mentioned earlier, GBH, and there were some American hardcore punk bands too that we were into, but we just started writing, and some of them were 3-chord, progression, and it was just how we did it. But we were never really set out to have a certain sound, but kind of just morphed organically and naturally.
With the Mattress Rats, was the sound kind of the same that you were going for, like, or did it kind of shift once Ron joined? Like, I heard you describe the Mattress Rats in like an old super ass old interview as destructo punk.
It was, yeah, maybe it changed a little harder, like a little more or a little less punk and a little more hardcore. But I think that both were represented in the things that we were writing. But I think that maybe it did tend to get a little more hardcore than punk.
You guys stay independent for like 10 years. Well, like, obviously you stay independent the whole way through, but I mean, like, it's 10 years before you put out even like an actual record. Was that like a conscious thing, or is that just you didn't find the right label, or just the situation never presented itself?
No, we always wanted to do our thing. There was offers here and there. Yeah, we just wanted to do our own thing, man. We didn't want to do any kind of deals. We wanted to be in control of what we wanted to say and write and put out, and that's how we did it.
I think it's awesome with those demos too, because you can really follow the evolution of some of those songs, like especially some of the songs that show up, a few times, like to hear as the band's getting harder and harder. Like, it's just, you're kind of getting to where ultimately the first album would be, but it's just, it's amazing to kind of watch this evolution happen. And it's rare that you get to see that happen with a band.
Yeah. I mean, it was like football, 3 yards at a time, you know what I mean? And,
yeah.
We just kind of kept moving the ball forward, man. And honestly, Damian, we had no idea what we were doing. You know what I mean? A lot of our friends were dying. People were going to prison. People were ODing. They were crashing and burning all around us. And sometimes we didn't know what steps to take. And sometimes we had to hide out for months at a time because of something that happened at a show or down the street on the block. And honestly, man, we were just a bunch of kids, man, trying to make our way. And we loved music, and we loved what the hardcore, the punk scene represented. And we were just doing our best, man. But I appreciate now, looking back, seeing the evolution as well. I feel grateful to have made it out. You know, I've definitely got my scars and my those bumps and bruises along the way. But looking back, I do appreciate the evolution too. But also looking back, it was a mess, man. It was a complete mess. But I appreciate just seeing things develop the way they develop, and getting a message from somebody saying that we impacted them, or that they appreciated us, or that they that their life may have been changed for the better in some way or another because of something we might have said or done for somebody. And it's kind of amazing to me. It's kind of humbling to me that that it's impacted people the way it has, because like I said, we're a fucking mess, and we were just trying to survive and say the things that we wanted to say and do the things that we wanted to do. And it was just music to us. But looking back, it was so much more, hearing some of the things that that people say to us along the way. Humbling, man.
Well, the songs, like, you know, the songs hold up on a separate level, but I think it also just provides, like, it's a documentary, like you're saying, like you are documenting, it seems like, you know, and I mean this with no disrespect, but like a city in decline, like, you know, like listening to what you guys are singing about, like you're really, like, it's true street rock and roll.
It is. It really is, man. There's a lot of bands out there that write about things they know nothing about, and the things that we wrote about were our lives. And no disrespect or offense taken. It was a city in decline. It still is. There's parts that are seeing some revitalization, but along with that comes a whole bunch of gentrification too. And Detroit's a fucked up place, and there's a lot of fucked up people. And to see the people that have made it coming from the places that we've been is a beautiful thing, because there's a lot that haven't.
Why do you think that is with Detroit? Like, obviously, you know, the automobile industry collapsing, I think probably is a big factor there, but like, why do you think that city is so fucked up? Like it is something that just, you know, it just seems like it's, you know, and it's documented in your records, like it just seems to get worse as time was going on, especially throughout the 90s.
Well, I mean, I think it's probably the same reason other major cities experience decline, but I would say drugs, lack of opportunity, poverty. We've had dirty politicians in this city running it for decades. I mean, the same ingredients that make every other major city that is experiencing the same thing. You know, I would say that those are big contributing factors right there. But drugs, definitely. The lack of opportunities, like I said, vulnerable families because of the lack of opportunity, financial, you know, there's a lot to it, man. But drugs were a huge part of Detroit's downfall.
I guess going back to the beginning of Colton's life, like who did you guys play with in the beginning? Like what scene did you kind of fall into? Because you mentioned there's a lot of different cliques.
Oh gosh, we were playing with all the Detroit punk bands like SBLC, great punk band. We played with
great band.
You know, a lot of the bands that would come in from out of town from the East Coast would come, and we would end up being support for them. After we were support for them, they would invite us out east, and the Chicago bands that would come through, and you know, we would get in where we fit in, you know, and but there was a whole era where, because things got real crazy at Colton's live shows, that a lot of venues didn't want to touch us unless some direct, you know, headlining band put their foot down and said, no, this is who we wanted to play. So it was hit and miss. There was sometimes we would play 3 shows a year just because a lot of people didn't want to touch us.
Yeah. Like, when did that reputation begin to start? Like, do you remember like the first shows where, like, was it just the way Detroit was? Like the shows were just fucking nuts and you guys were just, you know, kind of the band that seemed to attract that? Or do you remember a specific show where things started to go crazy for Cole's life with people coming out and going nuts?
Maybe not a specific show, but a specific venue where a guy that ran a venue on 7 Mile. It was called Blondies. You know, we were a little wolf pack, Damian, and we stood by each other and stood for each other. And you know, this guy, we were teenagers, and this guy would bring these bikers in to try to run security for these clubs and try to kick us around, and we wouldn't take it, and we would end up tearing things up, and it was a continual, you know, I want to say half a decade, maybe better part of a decade thing, where he would bring in a bigger security force, and we would go with them. And but it started like that. But no matter where we were, we seemed to attract, you know, those on the fringe, or those most angry, or those most willing to stand up and fight for what they believed. And those are all kind of recipes for maybe some conflict along the way. So I couldn't tell you a specific moment where we got that reputation, but it was there. You know, we weren't going to lay down and just take, you know what I mean, what life was given. We were going to fight back. And I think that just kind of, you know, no matter where you go, there you are. So no matter what venue it was, or no matter what city it was, there we were, you know.
When did you start playing? Like, what was were you playing outside of Detroit on the first demo, or is it like kind of not until like you take over on vocals that you really start playing outside of Detroit?
You know, AF, no. So Ron was alive when we were starting to go out east. And it wasn't real often, but we did some AF shows on the East Coast, some Killing Time shows. I can't remember if that Set It Off record, if Ron was still alive or not, but we ended up playing their record release party at CB's, some Crown of Thorns. And again, you know, this stuff's kind of a blur, so chronologically I can't
yeah, of course,
say completely accurate, but there were some East Coast shows going on with Ron, but we really started traveling after he had died.
And obviously this is painful. If you don't want to talk about it, I completely understand. But going back to after Ron passed away, like, what was the motivation in keeping the band going at that point? And like, did you guys think about packing it in?
No, we never really thought about packing it in. We had things to say, and we had to do, and so that wasn't really an option. We had tried few different singers. We tried for probably a year. We were trying to piece it back together, and we just couldn't find anybody that could do what we wanted them to do. So I started doing vocals and playing guitar at the same time. But no, we never really thought about packing it in. We still had things that we wanted to accomplish.
I read in interviews with you back then that you said like a lot of the motivation for touring, at least with the band, was like trying to, you know, obviously track down this guy that had murdered your friend. Was that like a motivation in keeping the band going, is kind of spreading awareness about what had happened, or about this guy that was out there? Like you put his mugshot in the record, obviously, at a certain point.
Yeah, you know, we definitely wanted him to be held accountable for what he did, you know. Mm-hmm. So I'll never say somebody deserved to get killed, you know, but there's people that live their lives in a way that make you more likely or less likely to die like that. I mean, you live by the sword and you die by the sword, and Ron was a guy that lived by the sword. So it wasn't a surprise when he got killed. It was tragic nonetheless. You know, he had a young baby. You know, he was loved by many and hated by more, but he was my friend. And yeah, you know.
Yeah. Was like, what did that kind of change like the way you looked at the band after that? Because, you know, it's a few years later that you get the record out. Like, did that kind of spur you on to kind of, you know, I don't know, I don't want to say take it more seriously, but like actually kind of like document what's going on with the band a little bit more?
No, because like I said, when we were just trying to do our thing. I wouldn't say it motivated us to do anything more or anything less. It just when somebody close to you dies, it kind of it'll put that plant that seed, like that we're all mortal, that we will die one day, and that life and death are random. It can happen at any minute. Tomorrow is not promised to anybody, and it kind of he was 23. I think I was 23 at the time, and to have somebody so close get murdered like that, it kind of opened your eyes a little bit to the dangers of the world. Not that we didn't really know before, but Ron was one of 4 people that played in Cold as Life that are in the ground now. Jake Locke, he ended up ODing. He ended up he was involved in a robbery. He got shot with a 12 gauge. It blew one knee into the other, and he just never recovered. He ended up getting strung out on dope, and he crashed and burned. Johnny Myers, same thing. He OD'd and died. Timmy Mysick, he OD'd and died. It's just people crash and burn. But when people that close to you start dying, it definitely it'll raise that awareness that life and death are real random. So I believe it's important to pull those people that you love close and tell them that you love them and say the things that you need to say, because tomorrow's not promised, man.
Yeah, like what you're saying there is obviously, horrifically tragic, but it's just, no other band would survive that, and you hear about bands surviving the passing of one member, but like 4 members, like what's the motivation in keeping the band going? Like, obviously you're not doing this to become a huge rock star. Like, is it to document? Is it to just, I'm just wondering, like, what is the end game of Cold as Life at this point for you? Like at that point that you're keeping the band going?
To say what we wanted to say, to be who we wanted to be, to make music, to travel, to be shoulder and shoulder with the people that are doing the same thing in other cities. It's a brotherhood thing and a sisterhood thing. I don't know. I couldn't say there was any real specific purpose behind it, other than us really wanting to make music, us wanting to say and be heard, say the things we want to say and be heard and be taken serious, and maybe I guess document a little bit about the things that we've gone through, the things that we've seen, and maybe a little bit of that whole message that you can rise above your circumstances and your disadvantages and the pain and tragedy, uncertainty of what we face. No matter how bad things get, there's somebody out there with a worse story, with a more painful past. And I guess maybe if others see the things that somebody goes through and survives them or overcomes them and perseveres over them, maybe it offers a little hope. And I can't say that was our specific message, but looking back, maybe it was.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just your band, Cold as Life that's going through tragedy. Obviously, the lead singer of the Feisty Cadavers is murdered too. Like, there just seems like it's a scene that's plagued by death.
Yeah,
during this time period.
It is. And Steve Crass was a good guy, man. He was he would give you the shirt off his back. He was funny. He was kind, man. He was a good fucking guy, man.
And I think like, in addition to being actual like literal survivors, your band is the survivor of this era. Like, you're like you tell that story of the transition from like 80s Detroit punk to Detroit hardcore. Like, it's really, the band is the survivor of all these bands.
We are.
What I read that there's like an unreleased Vegas record. Like, you guys recorded for the second LP in Las Vegas first.
So yeah, we went out there, man. There was a guy that had worked with Slayer. I don't know to what extent. That we had a mutual friend. We ended up flying to Vegas to try to record, and it was a fucking shit show. You know, everybody split in different directions and got in all kinds of trouble. When we did end up recording, it was horrible. We ended up scratching the whole project.
Is that for the second record, that demo?
Oh gosh. I couldn't tell you, buddy. I couldn't tell you for sure.
Because there's like, it takes you 10 years to put out Born to Land Hard, but then you do Declination of Independence within a year.
Yeah, we were under a lot of pressure, man, to get another record out. Even though we were on our own, we had started touring the States and in Europe. Japan wanted us to come. That was when 9/11 happened too, so that put a kibosh on a lot of travel. But we had all this material and we wanted to record it. We had some momentum going with a whole bunch to say, and we wanted to get it out. So I do believe that Vegas, you know what, that Vegas session, it was supposed to be Declination, and I think we ended up finally recording it here in Detroit.
Yeah, I think it is recorded in Detroit. I think it says recorded in Detroit on it.
Yeah. I think at the Temper Mill, maybe. I forget exactly where, but yeah, we ended up scratching the Vegas deal and doing it here.
So it was like, what other bands were kind of part as Cold as Life during this period? Like, there's obviously H8Inc with Beast, but like, were there other bands that you kind of looked at as being part of like your Detroit scene at that time?
Gosh, as far as like the heavy, the hardcore, no, I can't say right off the top of my head there was any like peers. There was definitely bands doing some stuff, but oh, you know what? Tyrant was a band that was real deal. They stood for what they believed in, and they fought for what they felt was right. They were saying the things that meant something to them, and I would call those guys peers. But as far as like, I mean, there were bands in the punk scene that were doing some stuff back then, like the Beer Whores. They were doing great. But no, there wasn't a lot of hardcore bands at the Declination era that were really doing anything. And I apologize to the ones that might have been, but offhand, I can't think of any right now. Dogs of War were always doing some good stuff for sure.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of awesome how, like, because the nature of the scene, I guess, is like you guys are still, with punk bands and still playing with punk bands. Like Cold as Life is still a punk band. Like it's not segregated as just, the hardcore scene.
Absolutely. So a lot of the hardcore bands back then, they were writing like a breakdown for their breakdown for their breakdown for their breakdown. You know what I mean? And Cold as Life was more of a mix. There were some breakdown parts, but we weren't writing for, okay, everybody's going to go crazy at this breakdown. You know what I mean? We weren't doing the chugga thing. We still had the discharge influence, we were just doing our thing. We weren't trying to write to appeal. A lot of bands, and I've talked about this before, a lot of bands, if they get a little momentum, right, and they get a little fan base going on, they want a bigger fan base and they want a little more momentum. So they try to write accordingly. They try to write so that they get more people at their shows. They write so they sell more t-shirts, and we just never wanted to do that.
Yeah. It's also, I guess, like you described, as like a function of, developing in isolation. Like you're developing without sonic peers, so you're going to not copy anyone. You're just going to be your own band.
Absolutely. So there was the East Coast thing, there was the West Coast, and even a Chicago thing going. That they all had their identifying sound or styles, and Detroit is just a fucking shithole in the middle of the Midwest that didn't have any kind of anything to go by. We were just our own thing.
It's so weird though, like, it's like you describe it as a shithole in the Midwest, but then you look, like Cold as Life, like H8Inc, like all the hardcore stuff going back all the way, the White Stripes and like Insane Clown Posse and Eminem, like all this stuff, like it just feels like it is the music city, like it is the music city, like of all different types of music, especially during this 90s kind of period.
I agree. I think it's because it's so isolated too, though. I think those bands that really make it, or those artists that really make it, they their craft is honed in that isolation. You know what I mean? And the sound that they come out with is so unique to them and their experience that I don't think people can deny it. So I believe it's because, in part, we don't have, the support, or, we're the underdog. This city, and its occupants, man, we're the underdogs of the world, and we got to fight a little harder and scream a little louder and write a little better. And I mean, I don't know. I say that all with humility, but I think the people that make a name for themselves in this city make a name for themselves, in other places because of that, because they have to fight a little harder.
It also feels like a self-starter city, like like look at yourselves, like even look at like ICP and the White Stripes, like all these artists, like they started their own labels, like they didn't wait for someone to come find them, they're doing their own thing first.
Right. I think maybe out of necessity too.
I've actually weirdly heard both people from the White Stripes and people from ICP talk about Cold as Life with reverence. Like it's just, you're that band that like, impacted all these scenes, it seems.
Hey, ICP played their very first show with Cold as Life at this club called Todd's on the east side of Detroit. Their very first show, man.
How did that go over? Like, were they doing the clown and everything at that point?
Oh, listen, man, it was a shit show, bro. They remember that band Crisscross, that hip hop little kid band where they wore all backwards clothes. Yeah. So that's how they showed up, man. They had their clothes on backwards, and they had this manager, and they had not played a show yet, and they walked into a hardcore show with, I don't know, maybe 400 or 500 people, and they said that they were headlining right off rip, and it ended up being a big old ordeal, but it went down. It went down. They played, and people were wondering who the fuck these guys were. It was a hardcore bill in a hardcore club, and I mean, they did their thing, but people in the audience were wondering what the hell was going on.
How do they get on that bill? What's our manager thinking?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. I remember being gosh, man. I don't know, man. We were, I want to say Pennsylvania somewhere, playing a big show, and a couple other bands, a band called Without Warning from Detroit, a hardcore band from here. They were on the bill. One of the drummer's little brother, I'm looking down this hallway. There's an elevator down the end of the hallway, and I see this fight going on, and it was the drummer's little brother beating up ICP in the elevator. It was kind of funny. Just talking about it brought that up.
What about Plus Minus Records? Because obviously they do the first pressing of Born to Land Hard on CD. Like, when did you first play with Earth Mover? Do you remember? Like, did you play with Earth Mover at all?
Absolutely. You know what? And my apologies for not mentioning them. They had a good following, man. They were a good band.
Yeah.
Lenny has always been my buddy. I thank him for his service. He was he had some injuries as a soldier in the Army. Good young cat. Earth Mover and Cold as Life did play some shows together. We had completely different crowds. They had a younger, more suburban crowd, but they went ape shit when Earth Mover played.
Yeah.
They kind of looked at us as like the old school, and they were the new school. We were on the way out. They were on the way in. Us as bands didn't have any kind of beef at all. They're like I said, Mike Hasty and Lenny, they were my buddies. But we had completely different crowds.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, like, It's amazing because you're both hardcore bands, but like it's that few years of difference where it's like almost a generational thing. But I can't imagine someone ever saying, "Oh, Cold as Life's on the way out." I can't even picture someone doing that.
Right. Well, I mean, there was people that looked at us like that. We were dinosaurs, you know. But we were also people that others didn't really want around, man. You know what I mean? Because it was just, there was just times where things just didn't go good, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I read in some old interview that actually one of the motivations for the first tour was because you got a tip that Ron's killer might be hiding in Europe. Was that really the motivation for the first tour?
No.
Okay, I was in an interview with someone from a Eurozine from that back then. So
we definitely made it known that this was a cat that we were looking to find for sure.
Yeah. What was it like going to Europe for the first time? Like what was it like going outside of Detroit because you have such a defined thing within that city? Like, what was it going out and going to other places? Like, was it always receptive, or were there certain places that were more receptive than others outside of New York, obviously, and Chicago?
I was amazed, really. I was amazed playing shows in Finland or Germany or Holland where people were screaming the lyrics at us. I think our first tour was 99. And, we were going from playing, 200 to 500 person shows in the States to shows where thousands of people were there screaming lyrics. There were some people, there was a lot of shows, Damian, where, because of the reputation that Cold as Life had, that were kind of on the sidelines, kind of, reserved or conservative because they didn't know what to expect, or maybe they were a little bit nervous. So you would always see maybe a lack of participation because of maybe some nerves. But I was amazed and humbled when we would go to Europe. We got a call one day from Theo from the Noise in Europe, wanting to bring us over there. And at that point, we had started and stopped and experienced all the things that we've experienced, and we never in a million years thought we'd go to Europe. So when we got the call to go over there, we were excited, we were humbled, but to show up in different cities across the planet and having people scream our lyrics and buy our merchandise, and it was humbling, man.
It always felt like Cold as Life was like about to explode. Like there was just like, it was always bubbling up. Like, once again, this is from an outsider's perspective, like looking at it, but it always felt like, do you think it was just like inconsistent lineup issues, or because you did insist on staying independent, why you guys were never able to, like, not that you weren't, like, obviously you're legends around the world, but I mean, like at the same time, like just, on a consistent level touring and things like that, like you were never able to kind of like, find that, it just feels like, I don't know. I wonder why is what I'm trying to get at.
I think it's definitely for the two reasons you mentioned, when you don't have tour support and you're, what I mean, buying cheeseburgers to eat off of, from merch sales, when you're having to come up with your own recording budgets and touring in a beat up, 20-year-old van, it gets a little tough to get out there the way you need to get out there. And the circumstances that we went through, there was, it seemed like every couple of years, one of our members were dying, or getting locked up, or, and they're demons they got to fight, or whatever the case might be. But I think, that it's a little bit of all of that really that kept us from getting to where we wanted to be. Plus I think that, maybe it was just something that was so real that maybe some labels and some of the mainstream, not that Cold as Life was ever a mainstream type commercial type band, but I think that we were always on the fringe because we were on the fringe. We were outcast because we were outcasts. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. There's like a fear around the band, like people were legitimately scared of Cold as Life. It felt like.
Yeah, and I hated that it shows, man, because that's not what we wanted. We wanted everybody to go ape shit, and there was people that would, you could see it in their faces, like, fuck, I don't even know what to do.
Well, I guess that's the burden of that reputation, right? Like it obviously makes the band into this legendary thing, but then you have to deal with this thing everywhere you go.
Right. Yeah. I agree with that.
Do you want to actually, before we get to that, sorry, how did H8Inc come together?
Tom had always been a friend of ours that always wanted to do a band, and we just started doing it. You know, me, Tom, and or Beast, sorry, and Roy, we've been getting together. We've been making some music. But it was always H8Inc always had Roy or myself and Beast as part of it. You know, there's been alternating members over the years, but Tom had always been a friend of ours. Or I'm sorry, Beast, you know him as Beast. But it was just always kind of like our little thing. You know, it was Tom, it was Roy, and it was me, as well as Enzo from Dogs, or Emery. He's gone now, but you know, H8Inc's taken a few different forms, but it's always been Tom, me, and Roy.
One of the first fucked up shows my band was actually going to be opening for you guys
in Toronto.
H8Inc and Ride 99 at the Cathedral.
Right on.
And that was the first time I met Tom. So yeah, like it's, I don't know, like once again, it's, you know, another band that, you know, truly independent, but so fucking sick. Like, those songs are awesome on that record.
So I was locked up when Clockwork came out. Mm-hmm. And I've only been out for, I don't know, maybe 10, 11 months now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I was gone for quite a stretch, but I hadn't heard it before. And Tom turned me on to a CD of it maybe 2 months ago. And it's been in my CD player in my truck nonstop since. And it is a phenomenal record, man. But I've always liked H8Inc, man. I wish Roy and I, or the people that were involved in it and with it at any given time, could have given it a little more of attention, because I think with a little more attention, a little more effort on our parts as musicians, really pushing it, I think it could have been a lot more. But H8Inc, man, it's a good band.
Do you want to get back to singing? Are you going to start singing again when obviously this is over and we can start doing shows again?
You know, I don't know, Damian. I'm a guitar player. I never even wanted to sing for Cold as Life, man. I like to play guitar. I did it by default. You know, I didn't want to do it, but we couldn't find anybody that could do what we wanted them to do. So I don't know. Some people want me to. You know, in the music that we're making right now, you know, we're talking about it. You know, Roy and I are talking about doing some Cold as Life. We're talking about doing some H8Inc, but right now we're just doing something new. You know, we play some Cold as Life, we play some H8Inc. We're thinking about it, we're talking about it, but we've not made any decisions yet. Right now we're just reconnecting and knocking some dust off and rust off, and excuse me, and seeing where it goes.
Oh, the reason I laughed there too is because, you know, you're not a singer, but you took to it really well. Like you seem like a singer.
I'm really not, man.
I
play guitar, man.
What is it about what is it that you don't like about singing?
I think that anybody, when they hear their voice on a message or a recording of any sort, it kind of makes them cringe. And it's just always been that way for me, you know?
Yeah, you have to be really fucked up to like the sound of your own voice.
Right, man. That's what I'm saying, man. We used to laugh about it, man, but I sound like fucking Astro, man, from the Jetsons when I sing.
Someone once said I sounded like Yosemite Sam when I sing, and that's stuck with me my whole life now. I can't get it out of my head. So
right.
If you ever want to do a duet, we can do a cartoon duet sometime.
Hey, I'm not opposed to it, buddy. Let's make it happen. Hey, I'll have my people call yours.
Well, I've kept you for a while, and anytime you want to come back on the show, Jeff, please know that the door is always open. But can I ask you a couple more questions before you go?
Absolutely.
You know, we've talked about a lot of unbelievably bands, but most of them are totally obscure from Detroit. Like, what are some of the bands that you think people should be paying attention to, or just kind of slip through the cracks back then, like from any era? Like, it doesn't have to be, you know, back in the day type thing.
Bro, Listen, man, Heresy.
Yeah.
One of the best Detroit bands ever. Pitbull, one of the best Detroit hardcore. And I'm sorry for not mentioning them earlier. Great hardcore bands from Detroit. Malaco Plus, great punk band from Detroit. The Beer Whores, great punk band from Detroit. Off the top of my head, those four right there will they'll keep your tape deck or your CD player busy for quite a while.
Actually, that was the last band I wanted to ask you about was Pitbull, because I think that band's like so underrated. Like that, those 7-inches are fucking incredible.
Yeah, they are. They're one of those bands. I think because they were from Detroit, they were overlooked, and tragically, man, Joey. Oh man, the drummer. He was one of my best friends, man. He ended up committing suicide a couple years back. I was in prison. When I got out, I got a hold of his brother. I'm not a big social media guy, man, but I used it to kind of reconnect when I got out of prison. And I found his brother on there, and I messaged him and I said, "Where's Joey, man? I got to talk to him. I'm back, and I just want to go give him a hug, man." And he told me he killed himself. But yeah, man.
Sorry, man. I'm really sorry.
He was a great fucking guy, man. It's one of them losses that just doesn't make sense, man.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's I don't know, just it keeps coming back to this, but it is a scene that has had unbelievable losses. Like, not that everywhere doesn't experience loss, but just we've gone through just name after name that have passed away from, and it's not a huge scene.
Damian, when I got out, and I started asking, where's this guy, where's this girl, where's, you know what I mean, and the amount of people that were gone, and just in those 8 years that I was gone, is overwhelming, man. Yeah, I don't know what to do. I don't know if there's something in the water or what, man, but there's a lot of loss here, man.
Well, Jeff, this has been a dream come true for me, and anytime you want to come back on this and wax about punk or hardcore, please know you're always welcome.
Hey, man, there's always something to say, right?
Thank you, Jeff, for coming on the show. And you heard right there, Jeff will be back for part 2 whenever he wants to come on and talk about more stuff, because, my gosh, he might not like his voice, but I think his voice is amazing. And one day we'll make that duet. We'll make that the cartoon duet, the Warner Brothers Hanna-Barbera coming together of Astro and Yosemite Sam. Speaking of making things happen, next week on the show, we're going to keep making it happen by having another legendary vocalist on the show. A vocalist who changed the way people sing in hardcore bands forever after, some of these records that he put out. From the band Lifetime, from 00, from also the brand new Beach Rats, who are incredible, but also from Enough and Resurrection. The great Ari Katz will be joining me on the show, and this is a super fun conversation with, people don't give this guy enough credit. He's one of the funniest people in punk or hardcore. Punk and hardcore? Punk or hardcore? Yeah, either or both. He is one of the funniest people. He's a hilarious dude, and I cannot wait for you to hear it. And that's that. Remember, as always, Black Lives Matter. The lives of Indigenous people matter. We need to protect trans kids, and we need to help trans people protect themselves, and just stop all this violence and hatred towards people of Asian descent. Like, this is just, this has got to stop. It's just fuck fascism. Like, these aren't political issues. These are just basic human rights issues, and people need to be respected for who they are. And if you can't do that, well, I don't know. We gotta do it. We gotta do it. So, sign petitions, get involved, lend your time, educate yourself on what's going on in the world, definitely. And that's that. Fuck Nazis, repeatedly. Sign your organ donor cards, because by the time they come looking for those organs, you don't need them anymore, and maybe that can just, it helps someone else live their life, Like Jeff said, hug everyone, hug the people around you, because you never know when you're going to lose them, and they're not going to be there. So tell the people you love that you love them. Let them know. Do something creative for yourself. Put yourself out there. It can help. It can help deal with. Can help you deal with a lot of different things. And speaking of dealing with things, try meditating. I tried it, and it's kind of working for me. I'm not saying it's going to work for you. I didn't believe it was going to work for me, but it did. So why not? Why not try it? And that's it. All right, everyone. See you next episode. Thank you very much for listening. Oh, remember to check out Oil and Flowers over there on wherever you listen to your podcasts. It has its own feed now, hosted by Buddha Blaze and myself. We talk about cannabis. And remember to buy that reissue of Born to Land Hard, one of the hardest records of all time. And that's it. Thank you for listening. Bye.